On a cold night, a barefoot girl enters a store carrying her hungry baby brother in her arms. Her innocent promise to pay when she grows up is heard by a lonely, wealthy man who decides to intervene. This unexpected encounter forever changes the fate of a broken family and a sleeping heart. Before we begin, become part of our family here on the channel. Subscribe now, leave a like, it helps our work so much, and write in the comments which city you're watching from. I love to know how far our stories travel. The July night in Chicago carried with it that damp cold that seeps into your bones and never leaves. The biting wind blew through the downtown streets, pushing dry leaves and papers across the sidewalk, while the fine drizzle left everything with a slippery sheen under the glow of the streetlights. It was one of those early mornings when those with a warm roof over their heads prefer to stay home, and those who don't seek any shelter they can find. The convenience store on Michigan Avenue was nearly empty at that hour. The fluorescent lights created an artificial contrast with the darkness outside, and the clerk, a young man in his early 20s named Julian, yawned as he organized some shelves. The low sound of the radio played a country song, mixing with the constant hum of the refrigerators. That's when the glass door opened with the familiar tinkle of the bell, bringing with it a gust of cold air and a sight that made Julian stop what he was doing. A girl of about 10 years old entered the store. Her bare feet left wet tracks on the clean floor, and her clothes, a faded pink t-shirt and a torn denim skirt, were soaked by the drizzle. But what drew the most attention was what she carried in her arms, a baby of a few months wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days. The infant was crying softly, a weak, tired cry that was heartbreaking. The girl approached the counter with hesitant steps, her large dark eyes reflecting a determination that didn't match her age. Her brown hair was stuck to her face from the rain, but she held her head high, as if she carried all the dignity in the world in her small, frail body. "Please, mister," she said, and her trembling voice echoed through the silent store. "My brother is hungry. He hasn't stopped crying since yesterday. The lady at the pharmacy said you have baby formula here." Julian looked at the girl, then at the whimpering baby in her arms, and felt a tightness in his chest. He had seen a lot working in that store, especially on the overnight shifts, but something about this situation left him speechless for a few seconds. "Look, kid," he began, trying to be gentle but aware of the company's rules. "I understand the situation, but I can't just give away products like that. You know, you need money to—" "I know, mister," she interrupted him, gently rocking the baby to try and calm him. "I know you have to pay. But I promise you, I swear on my grandmother's soul, that when I grow up, when I can get a job, I'll come back here and pay for everything, every cent, with interest if you want." The sincerity in those words was almost palpable. There was no trickery or manipulation there, just the pure desperation of a child trying to care for someone even smaller than herself. Julian felt his throat tighten and looked around as if searching for an answer on the shelves full of products. "Listen, I really want to help, but that's not how it works. I work here. I'm not the owner, understand? If my boss finds out—" "How much is the formula?" she asked, not giving up. "The smallest can is $17.99, Julian replied, almost whispering. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, as if doing an impossible calculation in her head, and then looked at the baby in her arms. His crying was getting weaker, which was even more worrying. "Can you write down my name?" she asked with a disarming seriousness. "Sophia Smith. I live on the street behind here, under the overpass. When I turn 10, I'll look for work as a babysitter or cleaner. When I turn 15, I can work for real. Then I'll come here and pay." Julian looked at her, not knowing what to say. It was impossible not to be touched by the determination of this child, by the way she held the baby so carefully, as if he were the most precious treasure in the world. At the same time, he knew he couldn't just give her the products, not without risking his job. It was at that moment that a man's voice sounded from behind them. "$17.99, you said?" Sophia turned quickly, hugging the baby tighter, as if preparing to flee. Near the cookie aisle stood a man of about 45, wearing a dark overcoat and carrying a small shopping basket. His graying hair was neatly combed. and even in the dim light of the store it was clear his clothes were of good quality. There was something in his eyes, however, that didn't match his prosperous appearance, a deep sadness, as if he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders. "Sir?" Julian stammered, not quite understanding the situation. The man approached the counter with firm steps, placed his basket on the floor, and took his wallet from the inner pocket of his coat. His movements were confident, but there was a contained emotion there, as if something inside him had awakened from a long sleep. "The girl said she'll pay when she grows up," he said, looking directly at Sophia. "That's quite a promise. How many people do we know who make promises like that and keep them?" Sophia stared at him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. She had already learned, even at such a young age, that not every adult who offers help has good intentions. But there was something in this man's voice, a genuine kindness that made her stay, even with all her instincts screaming at her to run. "I will keep it, yes." "Sir," she said, lifting her chin, "my mum always said that our word is the most important thing we have. It's the one thing nobody can take from us." The man smiled for the first time, and it was as if the sun had risen in the middle of that cold night. He took out a $50 bill and placed it on the counter. "Then it's a deal," he said to Julian. "You can ring up the baby formula, and some diapers too if you have them, and maybe something for the girl to eat." Julian blinked a few times, still processing what was happening. "Sir, are you sure?" "Absolutely," the man replied without taking his eyes off Sophia. "But it's not charity. It's a loan. The girl has already said she'll pay it back." Sophia felt her eyes fill with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. It was pure relief, mixed with a gratitude so immense it couldn't fit in her chest. The baby in her arms had stopped crying, as if he sensed that something had changed in the air. "Thank you, sir," she managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means." "Yes, I do," he replied, and there was a profound sincerity in those words. "I imagine more than you think." Julian, still a bit dazed by the whole situation, began to gather the items: baby formula, diapers, some crackers, a milk chocolate bar. As he scanned everything at the register, the man watched Sophia attentively. She gently rocked the baby, whispering words of comfort in his ear, and there was a tenderness there that touched something deep in the man's chest. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia," she replied, "and this is my brother, Peter. He's 5 months old." "A pleasure to meet you, Sophia and Peter. My name is Charles. Charles Miller." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Miller." When Julian finished bagging everything, Charles took the bags and turned to Sophia. "Let me carry these. You're already carrying Peter." Sophia hesitated for a moment. "You don't have to walk with me, sir. I can get there on my own." "I'm sure you can," Charles said, "but it's very cold outside, and very late. If you don't mind the company, I'd like to make sure you get home safely." Charles didn't quite know why. He was doing this. For years he had lived a methodical and solitary life, leaving his house only for work or for essential shopping trips like this one. He avoided contact with people, avoided getting involved, avoided feeling. But that little girl's promise had touched something he thought had died, along with his wife 3 years ago. Sophia studied him carefully. She had developed a keen instinct for people, born from the necessity of survival. And something about this man told her she could trust him. Not completely. She didn't trust anyone completely, but enough to accept his help. "Okay," she said, "finally. But it's just around the corner under the overpass on the next street." The three of them left the store together, with Julian watching through the glass window, still trying to process what he had just witnessed. The drizzle had stopped, but the cold remained intense. Charles took off his scarf and, without asking, wrapped it around Sophia and Peter. "Thank you," she murmured, surprised by the kindness of the gesture. As they walked through the empty streets, Charles felt a strange sensation growing inside him. It was as if, after years of being asleep, he was slowly waking up. The girl's promise had broken down a wall he didn't even know he had built around his heart. "Sophia," he said as they turned a corner, "may I ask where your mother is?" "She's waiting for us," Sophia replied, and there was a hesitation in her voice. "It's just that she hasn't been doing too well lately. Ever since Peter was born, she gets kind of confused. Charles understood what she wasn't saying. Postpartum depression, perhaps aggravated by the vulnerable situation they lived in. He didn't ask anything else, but he felt his chest tighten even more. When they reached the underpass, Charles understood the true scale of the situation. Beneath the concrete structure, protected only by a few tarps and pieces of cardboard, a sort of dwelling had been improvised. A woman of about 30 was sitting on what looked like an old mattress, staring into the void with a distant expression. "Mom," Sophia called, approaching carefully. "I brought milk for Peter, and there are diapers too." The woman slowly lifted her eyes, and Charles saw a tired beauty there, worn down by circumstances but still present. Her blonde hair was disheveled, and her clothes were visibly dirty, but there was dignity in her face, even in its fragility. "Sophia, you disappeared," she said, her voice sounding distant. I was worried." "I'm sorry, Mom. Peter was crying so much, and I couldn't stand to see him like that anymore." It was then that the woman noticed Charles, standing a few feet away holding the bags. Her eyes widened, and she instinctively hugged her knees in a defensive posture. "Who is this man, Sophia? What does he want?" "It's okay, Mom," Sophia said, sitting beside her. "This is Mr. Miller. He helped us buy the milk for Peter." Charles took a step forward slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. "Good evening, ma'am. My name is Charles Miller. Your daughter is a very brave girl." The woman looked at him with suspicion, but there was also a deep exhaustion in her eyes, as if she no longer had the energy to fight against anything. "Why did you do this?" she asked, her voice just a whisper. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing," Charles answered sincerely. "Your daughter made a promise. She said she'd pay me back when she grew up. I believed her." Charles placed the bags on the ground and stepped back a few paces, giving the family space. "I'll leave you now. Take care." He was turning to leave when Sophia's voice stopped him. "Mr. Miller," she called, "thank you again, really, and I will keep my promise. You can be sure of that." Charles turned and smiled at her. "I know you will, Sophia. I'm absolutely sure." As he walked away, Charles felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. The girl's promise had awakened in him a hope he thought he had lost forever. And for the first time in years, he wanted to wake up the next day to see what would happen. Behind him, under the overpass, Sophia prepared a bottle for Peter, while her mother watched her in silence, still trying to understand what had just happened. The warmth of the milk contrasted with the cold of the night, and for a few minutes in that makeshift corner in the middle of the big city, a family found a little peace. But Charles had no idea that this chance encounter in the convenience store would be just the first chapter of a story that would change all of their lives forever, just as Sophia couldn't imagine that her simple and sincere promise would be the key that would open doors she never dreamed existed. The night continued, cold and silent, but something in the air had changed, as if the universe had conspired for 4 lonely lives to meet at the exact moment they all needed hope the most. Charles couldn't sleep that night. Lying in his king-size bed in the silent 3-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, he stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of that unexpected encounter in the convenience store. The image of Sophia holding baby Peter so carefully, the determination in her eyes when she made that promise, the vulnerability of the mother under the underpass, it all echoed in his mind like a melody he couldn't stop hearing. At 5 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He got up, made a strong coffee, and stood on the balcony watching the city awaken below. Chicago never truly slept, but it had its moments of pause, and that early hour was one of them. Traffic was still sparse. A few workers were already walking along the sidewalks toward bus stops, and the sky was beginning to lighten to a grayish hue typical of overcast days. Charles thought about his routine for the past 3 years. Wake up, coffee, work at the law firm he had inherited from his father, lunch alone at the same restaurant, back home, frozen dinner, television and bed. An automatic cycle that kept him functioning, but not living. Since Helen had died, he had closed himself off in a bubble of professional efficiency and emotional emptiness. But something had cracked that bubble the night before. The girl's promise had awakened a feeling he no longer remembered existed. The desire to make a difference in someone's life. Around 7 in the morning, Charles made a decision that surprised even himself. He put on more casual clothes, dark jeans and a long-sleeved shirt, and left the house with a clear objective. He stopped at a bakery and bought fresh bread, milk, fruit, some children's vitamins, and even a few simple toys he saw in a store that was just opening. It wasn't an elaborate plan, it was pure intuition. When he arrived at the underpass, around 8 o'clock, he found Sophia already awake, trying to soothe a softly crying Peter. The mother was still asleep, or pretending to be, wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days. The family's makeshift home looked even more precarious in the daylight: wet cardboard, a few clothes hanging on a rope tied between 2 concrete pillars, and the smell of dampness mixed with exhaust fumes from the cars passing on the avenue above. "Mr. Miller?" Sophia saw him approaching, and her eyes widened in surprise. "You came back." "I brought some things," he said, showing her the bags. "I thought you might need breakfast." Sophia looked at the bags, then at him with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion that broke his heart. It was an understandable reaction, a child who had learned to distrust the gratuitous kindness of adults. "Why are you doing this, sir?" she asked, repeating her mother's question from the night before. Charles crouched down to be at her level. "You know, Sophia, there's something I've learned in life. When someone makes a real promise, like the one you made yesterday, it affects you. It made me remember things I had forgotten." "What things?" "That there is goodness in the world, and that sometimes we need to be a part of that goodness." At that moment, Sophia's mother stirred and slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Charles there, she sat up quickly, running her hands through her hair in an instinctive attempt to tidy herself. "Good morning," Charles said gently. "I brought you breakfast. I hope you don't mind." The woman stared at him for a few seconds, as if trying to decipher his true intentions. "I'm Amanda," she said finally, her voice still hoarse from sleep. "Amanda Smith." "A pleasure, Amanda. I'm Charles." "Why are you doing this?" she asked, echoing her daughter. "Nobody does anything for free." Charles sat on a cardboard box that served as a makeshift chair. "You're right, often people don't. But I'm not doing this for free. Sophia promised me she'd pay me back when she grows up, remember? It's a long-term investment." Amanda studied him carefully, looking for signs of falsehood, but there was something in his calm demeanor that made her less defensive. "And what if she can't pay?" "She will," Charles said with conviction. "Any child who has the courage to walk into a store in the middle of the night to get milk for her baby brother will be able to do anything in life." As they talked, Charles distributed the bread and organized an impromptu breakfast. Sophia helped prepare a bottle for Peter, and gradually the atmosphere became less tense. It was strange how a simple meal could create a sense of normalcy, even in those circumstances. "Amanda," Charles said after a few minutes of silence, "may I ask how long you've been here?" Amanda looked down. "About 2 months, since things got complicated." Sophia looked at her mother with concern. She had learned to read the signs when Amanda was about to drift away, as she called the moments when her mother disconnected from reality. "Things can get better," Charles said softly. "Sometimes we just need a little help to get out of the hole." "And what kind of help are you offering?" Amanda asked, suspicion returning to her voice. Charles had thought about this all night. "Well, for starters, how about a hot shower and a decent night's sleep? I know a family inn nearby. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe." Amanda stiffened immediately. "We're not prostitutes." "I know," Charles said, remaining calm. "And that's not what I'm suggesting. It's just one night for you to recover. Separate rooms, if you prefer. No strings attached. Why would you do this for strangers?" Charles was silent for a moment, fighting his own emotions. "Because my wife always said that you never know when you'll need the kindness of a stranger. She died 3 years ago, and since then I sort of forgot that. Sophia reminded me." The sincerity in those words was impossible to fake. Amanda saw the genuine pain in his eyes, and something inside her was moved. She had learned to recognize dangerous people, and Charles was not one of them. "Just one night?" she asked, hesitant. "One night to start," Charles agreed. Then we'll see how things are. Sophia, who had followed the entire conversation in silence while rocking Peter in her arms, finally spoke. Mom, it's been so long since we had a hot shower, and Peter needs a warm place. Amanda looked at her children, then at Charles, and something in his expression reassured her. There was a familiar sadness there, as if he too carried his own wounds. All right, she said, almost in a whisper. One night. The Chicago Family Inn was just 3 blocks away. It was a simple but well-kept establishment, with clean rooms and kind staff. Charles knew the place because he sometimes lodged clients from other cities there. It wasn't luxurious, but it had everything a family needed to feel safe. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s named Mrs. Nelson, looked with curiosity at the unlikely group entering the lobby. Charles approached the counter naturally. Good afternoon, Mrs. Nelson. I need 2 connecting rooms for tonight. Of course, Mr. Miller. Is this for family? She asked, glancing discreetly at Amanda and the children. Yes, it's for family, he replied without hesitation. While Charles handled the paperwork, Amanda felt uncomfortable in the hotel lobby. Her dirty clothes contrasted with the clean environment, and she was sure everyone was staring at her. Sophia held her hand, also a little intimidated, but at the same time fascinated by the chandelier on the ceiling and the clean smell of the place. All set, Charles said, returning with 2 keys. Rooms 205 and 207. Amanda, you and Peter can stay in 205. Sophia, you can stay with me in 207 if you don't mind. It has 2 separate beds. Amanda hesitated for a second, but the prospect of a hot shower and a clean bed spoke louder than her suspicion. The rooms were simple but cozy. Beds with white sheets, bathrooms with hot water, a television, and air conditioning. For Amanda and the children, who had been sleeping in the open for months, it felt like a palace. I'll let you get settled, Charles said. How about we meet for dinner at 7? There's a restaurant right here in the hotel. When Amanda entered the room with Peter, the first thing she did was run to the bathroom and turn on the shower. The hot water falling on her hands felt like a miracle. She looked at herself in the mirror and almost didn't recognize herself. 2 thin, lifeless hair, deep, dark circles under her eyes. But there was something different in her eyes at that moment, a small flame of hope she hadn't seen in months. Meanwhile, in the next room, Sophia explored every corner with the wonder of a child discovering a new world. She turned the air conditioner on and off several times, amazed that she could control the room's temperature. Then she went to the window and looked down at the street below, watching the people pass by with their seemingly organized lives. I've never slept in a real bed, she confessed to Charles, who was organizing some things in an armchair. Never? He asked, surprised. Well, I think when I was very little, before Peter was born. But I don't really remember. Charles felt his chest tighten again. Then tonight will be special. Your first time in a real bed that you'll remember. Sophia smiled, and it was the first time Charles had seen a genuine smile on her face. It wasn't just relief or gratitude, it was pure joy, the kind of joy only children can feel even in the worst circumstances. At 7 o'clock, the 4 of them met in the small hotel restaurant. The transformation was striking. Amanda had showered and washed her hair, and even in the same clothes as before, she looked like a completely different person. There was color in her face, and her eyes had more life. Sophia was radiant, with shiny hair and clean skin. Peter, who had had a warm bath and been properly fed, was sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. "How are you feeling?" Charles asked as they sat at a table near the window. "Like we're people again," Amanda replied, and for the first time he heard a tone of genuine emotion in her voice, not just exhaustion or suspicion. During dinner, they talked more relaxedly. Charles learned that Amanda had been a hairdresser before Peter was born, that Sophia loved to read and draw, and that the family had a loving dynamic despite all the difficulties. Amanda, in turn, realized that Charles was a genuinely lonely man, that the loss of his wife had left him lost in his own world. "May I ask how your wife died?" Amanda questioned during dessert. Charles was silent for a few seconds. "Cancer. It was fast, but not fast enough to not be painful. Helen always said I needed to learn to live alone, in case something happened to her. But I never learned. I just exist. That must be hard, Amanda said sincerely. It is. But meeting you all has made me realize that maybe I confused living alone with living in isolation. After dinner, as they went up to their rooms, Amanda stopped in the hallway and looked at Charles. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you so much. You're welcome. And Amanda, the offer doesn't end tomorrow morning. If you want, we can talk about other possibilities." What kind of possibilities? Charles had thought about this during dinner. "I have a vacant apartment in Lakeview. It's small, but it has 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, everything works. It's been empty for months. What if you stayed there for a while until you get back on your feet?" Amanda stared at him, looking for any sign that there was a hidden catch to the offer. In exchange for what? In exchange for Sophia's promise, and for you letting me help until you can walk on your own again. Why? Are you doing this for real? Charles smiled sadly. Because maybe helping you is a way for me to start living again myself. Maybe we need each other more than we realize. Amanda spent the whole night thinking about his proposal. Lying in a clean, soft bed, with Peter sleeping peacefully beside her, she felt a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that maybe, finally, they could have a chance to start over. Fear that it was too good to be true. In the next room, Sophia also couldn't sleep, but for different reasons. She was dazzled by the softness of the bed, the silence of the room, the feeling of safety. But mostly she was thinking about what Charles had said at dinner about his wife. She had lost her father when she was very young, and since then she had dreamed of having a real father figure. Was it possible that their paths had crossed with Charles's exactly when the 3 of them needed it most? Charles, for his part, was on the sofa in the living area, staring at the ceiling and wondering what Helen would say if she could see him now. She had always dreamed of having children, but the cancer treatments had made that impossible. Perhaps in some mysterious way she was guiding his steps toward this family that needed care as much as he needed purpose. When the sun rose the next morning, the 4 of them knew that their lives had changed forever. The promise of a 10-year-old girl had turned into the beginning of something much bigger, an unlikely family that was just beginning to discover the meaning of the word hope. 3 weeks later, the apartment in Lakeview had been completely transformed. What was once an empty, lifeless space, with furniture, covered in sheets and the smell of an abandoned place, now vibrated with the energy of a family. The walls that Charles had never bothered to decorate were now adorned with Sophia's colorful drawings, taped up. The kitchen, which he only used to heat up frozen food when he visited, now exuded the aromas of home-cooked meals that Amanda prepared with the fresh ingredients Charles religiously brought every week. Sophia was unrecognizable. Enrolled at Lincoln Elementary School, 3 blocks from the apartment, she had adapted to her studies with a hunger for learning that impressed even her teachers. Every afternoon, when Charles arrived from work, he would find her at the small table in the living room, surrounded by books and notebooks, with an almost obsessive dedication to her studies. "Look, Mr. Miller," she greeted him that Thursday afternoon, holding up a scribbled notebook. "Mrs. Mason said my essay was the best in the class. Want to see?" Charles put down his briefcase and sat beside her, putting on his reading glasses. The text, written in the still uncertain but neat handwriting of a 10-year-old, was about my hero, and to his surprise and emotion, the hero of the essay was not a comic book superhero or a football player. It was him. "My hero doesn't wear a cape or fly," Charles read aloud, his voice trembling with emotion. "He wears a suit and has a kind smile. My hero believed in my promise when everyone else would say that kids don't understand promises. He taught me that sometimes angels appear when you least expect them, and that real kindness does exist in the world." Charles had to stop reading for a moment, taking off his glasses to hide the tears that insisted on appearing. Sophia watched him with that peculiar intensity of children, able to see through the masks adults wear. "Did you like it?" she asked, anxious. "Sophia," he said, his voice choked, It's the most beautiful essay I've ever read in my entire life, and I've read many. It's because I wanted to write about someone real, she explained seriously. Mrs. Mason said that real heroes are the ones who make a difference in our lives, not the ones in movies. At that moment, Amanda appeared in the living room, carrying Peter in her arms. The baby had changed drastically in those 3 weeks. He had gained weight. His cheeks were rosy and healthy, and he smiled constantly, especially when he saw Charles arrive. Amanda was different too. The therapy with Dr. Francis Reed, whom Charles had found through his network of contacts, was having an effect. She still had difficult days, moments when sadness overwhelmed her, but they were becoming less frequent. "How was your session today?" Charles asked, as Sophia returned to her homework with renewed enthusiasm. "Better," Amanda replied, sitting on the sofa and settling Peter on her lap. "Dr. Reed says I'm making progress. I was able to talk about things I couldn't talk about before." Charles knew she was referring to the abusive relationship that had destroyed her self-esteem and led her to that vulnerable situation. Amanda had never shared the details, but she didn't need to. Charles saw it in the invisible scars, in the way she flinched when someone spoke too loudly, in the way it took her a long time to trust. "And what else did the doctor say?" Amanda hesitated for a moment. "She said I'm forming healthy attachments again, that it's normal for me to be afraid of getting close to people, but that I can't let fear stop me from living." There was something in the way she said it, looking directly at Charles, that made his heart race. In recent weeks, their relationship had evolved beyond simple humanitarian aid. They had developed an intimate and comforting routine. Charles would arrive from work, Amanda would have dinner ready, Sophia would show him her notebooks and school achievements, and Peter would play on the living room rug with the educational toys Charles had bought. "Amanda," Charles began, but was interrupted by his ringing cell phone. "Hello," he answered, not recognizing the unknown number. "Hi, is this the Lakeview apartment?" Charles frowned. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Roger, Peter's father. I heard he's there." Charles's blood ran cold. Amanda, who had heard the name, turned pale instantly, as if she had seen a ghost. Sophia stopped writing and looked at her mother, immediately sensing something was wrong. "One moment," Charles said, stepping into the bedroom. "How did you get this number?" "Hey, man, the city's not that big. A lot of people know Amanda around here. I found out she was in an apartment with the kids. I want to see my son." The man's voice was slurred, with that characteristic tone of someone who had been drinking but was trying to sound sober. Charles felt a dull anger rising in his chest. "You abandoned your family for over a year," Charles said, controlling his tone. "You have no legal right to demand anything." "Hey, calm down, buddy. I know you've got money and all, but the kid's my blood. I have rights, and if you don't want trouble, we'd better talk." Charles hung up the phone and returned to the living room. Amanda was holding Peter with a force that seemed to want to protect him from all the evils of the world. Her hands were visibly shaking. "Was it him?" she asked in a whisper. "It was. But don't worry. He's not getting near you." Sophia got up from the table and ran to hug her mother. "Who was it, Mom? Why are you like this?" Amanda looked at her daughter, struggling to find words that wouldn't frighten a 10-year-old. It was Peter's father, Sophia. He showed up." Sophia's eyes widened. She vaguely remembered Roger, a tall man who yelled a lot and made her mother cry. She was only 8 when he left, but she held bad memories of that time. "Is he going to take Peter?" she asked, her voice small and scared. "No," Charles said firmly, approaching and placing a protective hand on Sophia's shoulder. "No one is going to separate you. I promise." Amanda looked up at him, and Charles saw not only fear but also a touching trust. She believed in him. She believed he could protect them. "Does he have legal rights?" she asked. Charles thought quickly. As a lawyer, he knew the situation was complex. Roger was Peter's biological father, and even though he had abandoned the family, that gave him certain legal prerogatives. But there was also the history of neglect and abuse. Technically, yes, he has some rights as the biological father. But we also have strong arguments against him. Abandonment, neglect, lack of child support. And most importantly, we have evidence that you and the children are in a much better situation now. Charles knelt before Amanda, gently taking her hands. Listen, I'm going to call a colleague who specializes in family law. We'll prepare properly. You have my full support, legal and personal. But what if he manages to take Peter? What if the judge thinks he has more rights than I do? That's not going to happen, Charles said with conviction. You are a wonderful mother, Amanda. You've taken care of the children alone all this time. You're getting help, recovering, providing stability for them. No sensible judge would hand Peter over to someone who abandoned his family. Sophia, who had listened to the whole conversation with the precocious seriousness life had imposed on her, spoke up. Mr. Miller, Peter doesn't even know this man. Peter only knows you as a father. The girl's words hit Charles like a lightning bolt. Sophia had verbalized something they all felt, but no one had dared to say. Here, in this apartment, they had become a real family. Not a traditional family, but one based on love, mutual care, and the conscious choice to be together. Amanda looked at Charles with a new intensity. Sophia's right, she said, her voice still trembling, but with a note of determination. Peter only knows you as a father figure. You're here every night. You bathe him when I can't. You wake up when he cries in the middle of the night. Roger is just genetic, material. Charles felt his chest tighten with emotion. He had grown attached to Peter as if he were his own son. Watching the baby grow, teaching Sophia to ride a bike in the neighborhood park, helping Amanda rebuild herself, all of it had given his life a meaning he hadn't felt in years. Then that's what we'll argue, he said. Real fatherhood versus biological fatherhood. We'll show the judge that Peter has a present and loving father, me, and that separating him from this family would be detrimental to his development. But for that to work, Amanda said slowly, you would have to legally assume a position in our family. Charles understood what she was implying. To have legal standing as Peter's paternal figure, he would need to be more than a friend who was helping out. He would need to be legally recognized as Amanda's partner, assuming official paternal responsibilities. That's what I want, he said without hesitation. Amanda, Sophia, Peter, you have become my family. The only family I want to have. Amanda felt her eyes fill with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. It was relief, gratitude, and for the first time in a long time, a true hope that she might have a happy and secure future. Are you sure? She asked. It's not just because of the legal situation, because if it is... Charles interrupted her, gently taking her face in his hands. Amanda, I've fallen in love with you all three of you. With your strength, with Sophia's intelligence, with Peter's smile, with the family we've become together. Roger's threat just made me realize that I don't want to lose you. Ever. Sophia, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, couldn't contain herself. Does this mean you're going to be my real dad? Charles smiled, through his own tears. If your mother will let me, and if you want me to, I would love to be your real dad. I do, Sophia exclaimed, running to hug Charles. I've always wanted a dad, and you're the best dad I could ever ask for. Amanda held Peter against her chest, watching Charles and Sophia embrace, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe the world wasn't such a dangerous place after all. Maybe, just maybe, they could win this battle and build the family they all deserved. Then let's fight, she said. Let's fight, with a new determination in her voice. Let's fight for our family. Charles picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Robert Matthews, the best family lawyer he knew. As he explained the situation, Amanda put Peter in his crib and returned to Sophia, who was still radiant at the prospect of finally having a father. Mum, Sophia said, remember when I made that promise in the store? I said I would pay Mr. Miller back when I grew up. I remember, Amanda replied. I think I'm already paying him back. We're giving him a family, and he's giving us a family too. Everybody is paying everybody back. Amanda smiled, amazed at the wisdom of this girl who had grown up too fast, but could still see the world with the pure clarity of childhood. From the bedroom, they could hear Charles talking to the lawyer, his voice firm and determined. He was explaining the situation, asking for guidance on how to proceed, how to protect the family he had chosen from the threat that had resurfaced from the past. When he returned to the living room, his face was serious but confident. "Mr. Matthews will see us tomorrow morning. He said we have good arguments, especially with Roger's history of abandonment and neglect. But he also suggested that we formalize our union as soon as possible. It would strengthen our legal position." Amanda swallowed hard. "Formalize how?" "A civil marriage, a domestic partnership, some legal document that proves we are a constituted family, not just people living together." The word marriage hung in the air for a few seconds. It was a big step, even considering everything they had already built together. "Is it too soon?" Charles asked, noticing her hesitation. Amanda looked around. She looked at Sophia, bent over. Her notebooks, studying with the determination of someone who wants a better future. She looked at Peter, sleeping peacefully in his crib, his cheeks rosy with health. She looked at Charles, the man who had appeared like an angel on a cold night, and who had not left their side for a single day since. "No," she said finally. "It's not too soon. It's the right time. It's the right thing to do." Charles smiled, a smile of deep relief mixed with genuine love. "So, we'll go to City Hall tomorrow after the lawyer's office?" "We will," Amanda agreed. "We'll get married. We'll be a legal family in the eyes of the law, and we will win this battle against Roger." Sophia got up from the table and ran to hug them both. "Can I be the flower girl?" Charles laughed, and it was the first time Amanda had heard him give a real free and happy laugh. "You can, princess. You'll be the most beautiful flower girl there ever was." As the three of them embraced, with Peter sleeping peacefully in his crib beside them, none of them imagined the challenges that were still to come. But for the first time since they met, they were all sure of one thing. No matter what happened, they would face it together, as a real family. The civil wedding took place on a sunny Friday at the courthouse in downtown Chicago. Amanda wore a light blue dress that Charles had bought especially for the occasion, and Sophia was radiant in her role as flower girl, holding Peter in her lap throughout the ceremony. There were no guests, elaborate flowers, or a party, just the four of them. The judge, two witnesses who worked at the courthouse, and the solemn promise that they would stay together for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. "Charles Henry Miller," said the judge, "do you take Amanda Smith to be your wife, promising to be a faithful partner in prosperity and adversity, in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health, loving and respecting her all the days of your life?" "I do," Charles replied, looking into Amanda's eyes with an intensity that made her heart race. "Amanda Smith Miller, do you take Charles Henry Miller to be your husband, promising to be a faithful partner in prosperity and adversity, in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health, loving and respecting him all the days of your life?" Amanda took a deep breath, thinking of everything that had happened since that cold night in the convenience store. "I do," she said, and her voice sounded firm and confident. When they exchanged the simple rings Charles had bought at the corner jewelry store, Sophia began to cry with emotion. "Now we're a real family," she whispered to Peter, who was playing with her chubby little fingers. The honeymoon lasted exactly 6 hours. Shortly after a celebratory lunch at a restaurant near the courthouse, Charles's cell phone rang. It was Mr. Robert Matthews with worrying news. "Charles, Roger filed for joint custody this morning. His lawyer is Paul C. Drummond. You know him?" Charles knew him. Drummond was known for taking on difficult cases and using every legal strategy possible, not always the most ethical ones. "What is he alleging?" "Biological paternity, constitutional rights, and more interestingly, he's alleging that you coerced Amanda into marriage to strengthen your legal position. He says the marriage is a sham to undermine his rights as a father." Charles felt his blood run cold. "And his chances of winning?" "Slim, but they exist. That's why we need to act fast. First, I suggest you leave Chicago for a few weeks. I have a property in Lake Geneva I can lend you. Second, we will agree to supervised visits as a demonstration of judicial good faith." Amanda, who was listening to the conversation, turned pale. Supervised visits mean he's going to see Peter. It means a social worker will monitor controlled meetings, Charles explained, covering the phone. It's a strategy. It shows the judge we're not preventing contact, just ensuring Peter's safety. I don't want that man near my son, Amanda said, her voice trembling with anger and fear. Charles, you don't understand. He's dangerous. Amanda couldn't finish the sentence, but Charles saw in her eyes painful memories she still hadn't fully shared, not even with her therapist. What did he do, Amanda? I need to know so we can defend ourselves. Amanda picked up Peter and took a few steps away, as if she needed the distance to be able to speak. He used to hit me, almost every day. And when he found out I was pregnant, he said that if it wasn't a boy, he would make me lose the pregnancy. Sophia, who was playing with the table napkins, stopped and looked at her mother. She knew Roger was bad, but she didn't know all the details of the violence Amanda had suffered. Charles felt a cold anger rise in his chest. He threatened you and the baby? More than that. When Peter was born, he said that if I tried to leave or report him, he would take Peter and I would never see my son again. That's why I ran away in the middle of the night. I took the kids and just ran. We ended up on the street because I had nowhere to go, but I preferred the street to staying with him. Charles went back to the phone. Robert, write down everything I'm about to say. We have a history of domestic violence, threats against the minor and threat of kidnapping. Does this change our strategy? It changes everything. If we can prove that, the supervised visits become our weapon. He'll expose himself. Men like that can't control themselves when they're being watched. 3 days later, the family was settled in a cozy house in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The property was on a quiet street, surrounded by pine trees and with a beautiful view of the rolling hills. Sophia had been enrolled in the local school, where she quickly stood out again for her studies. Peter adapted well to the cooler climate, sleeping better and playing in the house's garden on sunny afternoons. Amanda, however, was becoming increasingly anxious. Even far from the city, she was constantly looking over her shoulder, startled by any strange noise. Her therapy sessions were now done via video call with Dr. Reed, but the distance wasn't helping her recovery. He's going to find me, she would say to Charles on the nights she couldn't sleep. Roger was always smart about these things. What if he finds out where we are? He won't find out, Charles would reassure her, holding her close. And even if he does, you're not alone now. You have a whole family to protect you. One of these late-night conversations revealed to Charles the true extent of the trauma Amanda carried. Do you know why I agreed to marry you so quickly? She asked one August pre-dawn, as she watched the fine rain patter against the window. Why? Because it's the first time in my life a man has made me feel safe. With Sophia's father, I was too young to understand the warning signs. With Roger, I was already too broken to manage to escape sooner. But with you, it's different. Charles turned to look at her in the dark. Different how? You listen to me. You ask what I want, what I feel. You play with the children without losing your patience. You've never yelled at me, never made me feel stupid or incapable. Amanda paused, searching for the right words. Dr. Reed says I confuse protection, with possession, that I learn to think that a man who yells and controls is the one who truly loves. But you've taught me that real love is quiet. It's care without demand. Charles felt his chest tighten with emotion. Amanda, you know that I love you, don't you? Not because you need protection, but because you are an incredible woman. Strong, intelligent, a wonderful mother. I know. And that's what scares me a little. I'm learning to love myself through your eyes. And I'm afraid that if you leave, I'll get lost again. I'm not leaving, Charles promised. Never. We are a family, Amanda. Forever. These intimate conversations strengthened the bond between them even more. Charles also began to open up about his own wounds. He told Amanda about Helen's last days, about the guilt he felt for not being able to save her, about the years of loneliness that followed. When I met you all, I was just existing, he confessed one afternoon as they walked through the historic downtown of Lake Geneva, with Peter sleeping in his stroller and Sophia running among the trees. My life was work home, I'd forgotten what it meant to have a purpose. And now, Now I wake up every day thinking about how I can be a better father to Sophia and Peter, a better husband to you. You gave me my life back, Amanda." It was during one of these peaceful afternoons that they received the call that would change everything. "Charles," said Mr. Matthews, his voice tense, "we have a problem. Roger found the address of the apartment in Chicago and broke in looking for you. He didn't break anything, didn't steal anything, but he made it clear he knows you're not there anymore." Charles moved, away from Amanda and Sophia, who were choosing books in a small bookstore. "How did he find out?" "A bribe, probably. Someone in the building must have talked. The new doorman didn't know you and must have given out information. The good news is that this strengthens our case. Breaking and entering even without material damage shows a disregard for the law. The bad news is that he's actively looking for you." Charles looked at his family through the bookstore window. Sophia was helping Amanda pick out a storybook to read to Peter, all of them laughing and at ease. To the hour, normality of the scene contrasted brutally with the threat hanging over their heads. "What do we do now?" "Stay there. Don't leave Lake Geneva. And get ready. Next week we have the first hearing. Amanda will need to testify about the history of violence." When Charles went back inside the bookstore, Amanda immediately sensed that something was wrong. "What is it?" "We need to talk when we get home," he said, forcing a smile so as not to scare Sophia. That night, after Sophia was asleep and Peter was in his crib, Charles told her about the break-in. Amanda was silent for several minutes, just staring into space. "I knew it," she said finally. "I knew he wouldn't give up." "Amanda?" "No, Charles. You don't understand. Roger doesn't want Peter because he loves his son. He wants Peter to have me under his power again. That's how men like him work. It's control, not paternal love." Charles took her hands, which were cold despite the heater being on. "Then we'll show that to the judge. At the hearing, you'll tell everything. We'll prove that he's a danger to you. What if the judge doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I'm making things up to favor you? That won't happen. We have evidence, Amanda, the apartment break-in, the medical records of your injuries when you lived with him, the police report you filed at the time." Amanda's eyes widened. "What police report? I never filed—" "The social worker at the hospital where Peter was born documented your injuries as possible domestic violence. It's standard protocol. You might not remember because you were in labor, but there is official documentation." For the first time in days, Amanda smiled with relief. "So we have a chance of winning." "More than a chance. We have a united family, solid evidence, and the truth on our side. Roger may have biological rights, but we have something much stronger, real love and true protection." At the local school, Sophia was excelling not only in her school subjects, but also in how she related to her classmates. The teacher, Mrs. Mason, coincidentally with the same name as her teacher in Chicago, had commented to Charles on how mature Sophia was for her age, but also had a natural generosity with the younger children. "She has a very developed sense of protection," the teacher said during a meeting. "It's as if she's a little mother to all her classmates. This could be a reflection of the early responsibility she had to take on with her brother." Charles shared this observation with Amanda, who became concerned. "I don't want Sophia to lose her childhood because of us." "She's not losing it," Charles reassured her. "She's gaining security, and security allows a child to be a real child." Indeed, in the following weeks, Sophia began to show a lighter, more playful side. She made friends with a girl from school named Beatrice, started asking for painting lessons, and even complained when Charles said he couldn't buy a toy she wanted. These were healthy signs that she was feeling safe enough to be a normal child. "You know what makes me happiest," Sophia said to Charles one afternoon as they walked home from school together. "It's that now I can make plans for the future. Before I could only think about what I was going to eat the next day or where we were going to sleep. Now I can dream of being a veterinarian or a writer or both." "And you will be," Charles said, feeling a wave of paternal pride. "You'll be whatever you want, Princess." But as much as they tried to maintain normalcy, the hearing was approaching, and with it, the need for Amanda to return to Chicago to testify. The prospect of being in the same city, in the same building as Roger, made her increasingly anxious. "What if he tries something at the courthouse?" she would ask every night. "There will be security. I'll be there. Mr. Matthews will be there. You won't be alone for a single second," Charles promised. On the eve of their trip back for the hearing, Sophia asked a question that took everyone by surprise. "Do you think if we win in court that bad man will stop bothering us?" Charles and Amanda exchanged glances. It was a child's question, but it touched the core of their greatest fears. "We hope so, Sophia," Amanda answered honestly. "But no matter what happens, we'll stay together and always protect each other." "It's just that I'm scared he'll hurt you," Sophia confessed. "I don't want to lose my family again." Charles knelt before her. "Sophia, look at me. You will never lose your family again. No matter what happens at the hearing, no matter what Roger does, you will always have a mother who loves you, and a father who would give his life to protect you. Do you promise?" "I promise. And remember your promise in the store that night. You kept it. You've already paid your debt to me with change to spare. Now it's my turn to keep my promises to you." That last night in Lake Geneva, before they returned to face what would be the most critical moment of their lives as a family, the four of them slept together in the living room, in a nest of blankets and pillows. Peter between Charles and Amanda, Sophia nestled in her mother's arms, all needing to feel the physical closeness that gave them security. Outside, the hills of Wisconsin stretched silently under the starry sky, oblivious to the human drama unfolding. But inside that cozy house, a family was preparing for the most important fight of their lives, the right to remain together and safe, far from the shadows of the past that insisted on haunting them. The family court division of the Daly Center Courthouse was especially busy that Tuesday in September. Amanda held on to Charles's arm as they walked through the corridors filled with people, lawyers and families in litigation. She wore a navy blue suit that Charles had bought especially for the occasion, discreet yet elegant, conveying the image of the responsible, centered mother she had become. Sophia had stayed with a neighbor in Lake Geneva, under the supervision of a social worker Mr. Matthews had arranged. Peter was in the arms of a specialized nanny who would accompany them throughout the hearing, in case it was necessary to present the child to the judge. "Mr. Charles Miller?" A male voice made them stop in the hallway. It was Roger. Amanda felt her legs go weak seeing him after more than a year. He was dressed in a cheap but clean suit, and had cut his hair and shaved for the occasion. To the eyes of someone who didn't know him, he looked like a concerned father fighting for his son's rights. But Amanda saw beyond the facade. She saw the small, cruel eyes, the arrogant posture, the fake smile that masked the violence she knew so well. "Roger," Charles said coldly, instinctively placing himself between him and Amanda. "Counselor," Roger made an ironic bow. "So, Amanda, being well taken care of by your rich husband?" Amanda felt the old sense of terror creep up her spine, but this time something was different. She wasn't alone. Charles by her side, Mr. Matthews approaching down the hall, the certainty that she had a whole family to protect her. "I'm not talking to you," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Only in the presence of the judge." Roger laughed unpleasantly. "Oh, really? Gotten all high and mighty now, have you? Found yourself a big shot and now you think you're better than everyone?" "That's enough," Charles said, stepping forward. "Any communication will be through our lawyers. Relax, counselor. I'm not going to touch your little woman. I just want to see my son. I have a right, don't I?" At that moment, Mr. Matthews arrived and immediately assessed the situation. "Roger, you know you cannot approach the family directly. This could be considered intimidation." "Intimidation?" Roger laughed. "I was just saying hello to my ex and my son's stepfather." The way he said stepfather was laced with venom, as if Charles were an intruder in Peter's life. But Amanda, to everyone's surprise, including her own, took a step forward. "Charles is not Peter's stepfather," she said, looking directly into Roger's eyes. "Charles is Peter's father, the only father he knows." Roger's face contorted with rage. "I'm the biological father. I'm the one who made the kid." "Anyone can make a baby," Amanda retorted, with a courage she didn't know she possessed. "Being a father is about being there, caring, loving. You never did that." Charles felt proud of the brave woman Amanda had become. Mr. Matthews took the opportunity to intervene. "Well then, we'll see you in the courtroom. Let's go, everyone." Judge Lewis F. Carter of the 3rd Family Court Division was known for his calm demeanor and well-reasoned decisions. At 58, he had witnessed hundreds of family disputes and had developed a keen instinct for distinguishing between parents genuinely concerned for their children and those who used children as tools of power. "Good morning," he said as everyone settled in the room. "We are here to evaluate the request for joint custody of the minor Peter Smith, filed by Mr. Roger Silver against Mrs. Amanda Smith Miller and her husband, Mr. Charles Henry Miller." Mr. Paul C. Drummond, Roger's lawyer, spoke first. "Your Honor, my client is the child's biological father and was absent due to circumstances beyond his control. Now employed and sober, he wishes to resume his paternal responsibility and develop a healthy relationship with his son." "What were these circumstances that were beyond your client's control?" the judge asked. "Problems with alcoholism, Your Honor, which have been overcome. My client has been sober for 8 months and works as a mechanic in a garage in Gary, Indiana." Mr. Matthews stood up. "Your Honor, I would like to present evidence that Mr. Silver's absence was not due to alcoholism, but rather to a systematic pattern of domestic violence against Mrs. Miller and threats against her minor children." The judge leafed through the documents he had received previously. "Mr. Matthews, I see here medical reports, a police report from the hospital where the child was born, and other documents. Mrs. Miller, would you like to speak about this?" Amanda stood up, her legs trembling, but with the determination of a mother protecting her children. "Yes, Your Honor." "You may remain seated," the judge said kindly. "Tell me about your relationship with Mr. Silver." Amanda took a deep breath and began to speak. Her voice was low at first, but gained strength as she recounted the years of abuse, the threats, the terror she felt, especially during her pregnancy with Peter. "He said that if I tried to leave him, he would take Peter from me, and I would never see my son again. That's why I fled in the middle of the night with the children. I preferred the street to continuing to suffer violence." "And how did Mr. Miller come into your life?" the judge asked. Amanda smiled for the first time in the hearing. "Sophia, my oldest daughter, went into a store to ask for milk for Peter, who was starving. She promised to pay when she grew up. Charles heard the promise and decided to help. It wasn't charity. It was as if we had found each other at the moment we all needed a family." "Mr. Miller," the judge said, "how do you see your relationship with Peter?" Charles stood up. "Your Honor, Peter is now 10 months old. I have been in his life for 9 of those months. I am the one who bathes him, who wakes up in the middle of the night when he cries, who takes him to the pediatrician who teaches him his first words. To Peter, I am his father, the only father he knows." "And your intention regarding adoption?" "We have already begun the adoption process, Your Honor. I want to be Peter's father legally, just as I already am in practice and in my heart." Roger's lawyer tried to intervene. "Your Honor, this is irrelevant. Biological rights cannot simply be—" "Mr. Drummond," the judge interrupted, "I will hear from your client now. Mr. Silver, what do you have to say about the allegations of domestic violence?" Roger stood up arrogantly. "It's Hala, Your Honor. Amanda was always dramatic. We fought, yes, like any couple, but I never hit her. Those papers there must be from when she fell or hurt herself." Mr. Matthews stood up. "Your Honor, could you please look at page 15 of the medical report? The injuries described are inconsistent with accidental falls." The judge examined the documents carefully. "Mr. Silver, I see here that injuries consistent with assault were recorded on at least 3 different occasions. How do you explain that?" "Amanda was always clumsy, Your Honor. She made all this up to hurt me." It was at that moment that Roger made his first mistake. His voice had become louder, more aggressive, and he gestured intimidatingly, even in the presence of the judge. "Mr. Silver," the judge said firmly, "I need you to keep your voice down and show respect for everyone present." "Sorry, Your Honor, it's just that it infuriates me to see my son being raised by another man. Peter is my blood." The second mistake. The concept of my blood, my property, was exactly what the judge had observed in dozens of cases of abusive parents. Mr. Matthews seized the opening. "Your Honor, this perfectly illustrates what we aim to demonstrate. Mr. Silver sees Peter as property, not as a child who needs love and stability." The judge made some notes and then looked at everyone present. "We will proceed with supervised visits as requested by the defense. It will be an opportunity to assess the dynamic between Mr. Silver and the child." Amanda's heart pounded, but Mr. Matthews had prepared them all for this possibility. The supervised visits would take place at a specialized center, with social workers trained to observe interactions between parents and children. The first visit was scheduled for the following week. On the day of the first visit, Charles and Amanda arrived at the center with Peter in their arms. The child, now 10 months old, was alert and smiling, completely at ease with Charles, whom he clearly recognized as his father. Roger arrived a few minutes later, visibly nervous. The social worker, Dr. Marina Scott, explained the rules. The visit would last 1 hour, would be recorded, and any inappropriate behavior would end the meeting. What happened next was exactly what Mr. Matthews had predicted. Roger, trying to impress the social worker, awkwardly took Peter into his arms. The baby, not recognizing him, immediately began to cry and reach for Charles. "Calm down, kid," Roger said, already irritated. "I'm your dad. Stop this nonsense." Peter cried harder, clearly uncomfortable. When Roger tried to stop the baby from crying by shaking him roughly, the social worker intervened. "Mr. Silver, I'm going to need you to be gentler. Babies are sensitive to the emotional state of adults." "He won't stop crying," Roger complained, his frustration evident. "Amanda spoiled him, babied him too much." Third mistake, blaming the mother for the natural behavior of a baby who doesn't recognize his biological father. The visit lasted only 20 minutes. Peter cried the entire time. Roger grew increasingly irritated and finally gave up. "This kid is impossible. Amanda must have given him something to make him act like this." The accusation that Amanda had drugged her own son was the final mistake. The social worker ended the visit immediately and wrote a detailed report on Roger's inability to handle a child appropriately. The second visit, 2 weeks later, was even worse. Roger arrived clearly agitated, not drunk, but aggressive. When Peter once again cried upon being separated from Charles, Roger lost his temper. "What the hell is this? The kid doesn't recognize me because you've been filling his head with stuff against me." "Mr. Silver," the social worker said, "Peter is 10 months old. He has not been influenced by anyone. He simply does not know you as a paternal figure. He will know me. He's my son." The way he shouted "my" startled not only Peter, but everyone present. The visit was terminated in 15 minutes, and the social worker recommended no further meetings until Roger underwent a psychological evaluation. Back in court 3 weeks later, Mr. Matthews presented the reports from the supervised visits. The judge read them carefully, asking the social worker specific questions. "Dr. Scott, in your professional opinion, does Mr. Silver demonstrate the aptitude to care for the child?" "No, Your Honor. Mr. Silver shows clear signs of an impulse control disorder, possible antisocial personality disorder, and a distorted view of fatherhood. He sees the child as property, not as a human being with emotional needs." "And what about the existing bond between Peter and Mr. Miller?" "It is unequivocal, Your Honor. Peter recognizes Mr. Miller as his primary paternal figure. The baby calms in his presence, responds to his vocal commands, and shows clear signs of a healthy attachment." The judge made his final notes. "Mr. Silver, do you have anything to add?" Roger stood up, and his lawyer tried to hold him back, sensing his client was about to make another mistake. "This is a joke," Roger exploded. "This guy bought my family with money. Amanda is a gold digger who sold herself to the first rich sucker who came along." The silence in the room was deafening. The judge looked at Roger with an expression that made it clear he had just sealed his own fate. "Mr. Silver, you may be seated. I will deliver my decision." The judge organized his papers, looked at everyone present, and began to speak with the solemnity typical of judicial decisions that change lives forever. After analyzing all the evidence presented, hearing the testimony of the parties, examining the reports from the supervised visits, and considering the best interest of the child, I rule as follows." Amanda was squeezing Charles's hand so tightly it was cutting off circulation. "First, the request for joint custody filed by Mr. Roger Silva is denied. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of inappropriate behavior, potentially dangerous to the minor. Second, the adoption of the minor Peter Smith by Mr. Charles Henry Miller is authorized, considering the established emotional bond, the demonstrated family stability, and the child's clear identification of the petitioner as a paternal figure. Third, it is determined that Mr. Roger Silva may only have contact with the minor after undergoing psychological treatment for a minimum period of 2 years, with a favorable evaluation from a professional accredited by the court." Amanda burst into tears, but they were tears of profound relief. Charles hugged her, and for the first time in months, they both allowed themselves to feel that they were finally safe. The Miller family is authorized to return to their usual residence, and Mr. Roger Silva is prohibited from approaching the petitioners within a radius of 500 yards. Roger stood up furiously. "This isn't over. I'll appeal. Mr. Silva," the judge said firmly, "any attempt at unauthorized contact with the family will be considered contempt of a court order. You have been warned." When they left the courthouse, Amanda, Charles, and Peter, who had slept peacefully through the entire final hearing in the nanny's arms, were greeted by Sophia, who had returned from Lake Geneva specifically to hear the result. "So, did we win?" she asked anxiously. "We won, Princess," Charles said, hugging her. "We won everything. We are officially a family now. Peter is my son by right, you are my daughter by right, and no one can ever separate us again." Sophia began to cry with joy. "Does that mean I can call you Dad?" "It means you are required to call me Dad," Charles laughed through his own tears. 6 months later, the family had settled into a happy and peaceful routine. They returned to Chicago to the apartment in Lakeview, which was now truly decorated like a home. Sophia, at 11, was in the 6th grade and continued to excel in her studies. She had decided she wanted to be a lawyer like her father, to help other families like ours. Peter, at 1.5, had taken his first steps and spoken his first words, Dada and Mama, clearly referring to Charles and Amanda. He held no memory of the difficult first months of his life. Amanda had completely recovered from the trauma she had carried for so long. She continued with her therapy sessions, but now as mental health maintenance, not emergency treatment. She had returned to work as a hairdresser at a salon near their home, regaining her financial independence and professional self-esteem. Charles had discovered that being a father and a husband had given his life a purpose that all his professional success had never provided. He still worked at his firm, but now he always left promptly at 6 to be present for family dinner. On a Saturday afternoon, while they were at the park near their home, Peter playing in the sandbox, Amanda reading a book on a bench, Charles pushing Sophia on the swing, a familiar situation occurred. A woman approached them carrying a child of about 3 who was crying inconsolably. "Excuse me," she said, clearly embarrassed. "You wouldn't happen to have something for him to eat? I'm trying to get to the shelter, but he's so hungry." Sophia stopped the swing and looked at Charles. "Dad, can we help?" Charles smiled. The word Dad still moved him every time he heard it. "Of course we can, Princess." They went to a nearby snack bar and bought food for the woman and her child. As the boy ate ravenously, the woman told her story. A husband who had lost his job, evictions, a series of misfortunes that had left the family on the street. "Thank you," she said when they finished eating. "I'll find a way to pay you back." Sophia stood up and looked at the woman with a seriousness that only a child who had endured hardship could have. "You don't have to pay us back. But if one day you're doing well, and you find someone who needs help like you do today, then you help that person. That way, everyone helps everyone." The woman was surprised by the girl's wisdom. "That's a beautiful way to see the world." "I learned it from my dad," Sophia said, looking at Charles with adoration. "He taught me that kindness isn't a loan, it's an investment. You plant kindness and you harvest family." Later, on the way home, Charles asked Sophia, Where did you learn all this philosophy?" "I actually learned it in 2 lessons," she replied seriously. "The first was in the store that night, when I made my promise. The second was watching how our family grew from that promise. We thought I was going to pay off a debt, but really everyone got much more than they gave." Amanda, who was walking beside them pushing Peter's stroller, smiled. "And do you think you've paid back your promise yet?" Sophia thought for a moment. "I think I understand now that the promise wasn't about paying for the milk. It was about believing that good things can happen, even when everything seems lost. And every time our family helps someone, every time we're happy, every time we show the world that families like ours can work out, I'm keeping my promise." Charles stopped walking and looked at his family, his wise and brave daughter, his strong and loving wife, his son who was drooling and smiling in his stroller, and he felt a gratitude so profound it could barely fit in his chest. "You know something, Sophia? I think we're all keeping our promises every day." "What do you mean, Dad?" "You promised to pay for kindness. I promised to protect you. Your mother promised to be the best mom she could be. Peter promised to be a happy and healthy boy. And every day we keep those promises just by being together." That night, after the children were asleep, Charles and Amanda stood on the apartment balcony, looking out at the city that had once frightened them and now welcomed them as home. "Do you believe in fate?" Amanda asked. "I used to not believe in it," Charles replied. "I thought it was all coincidence, luck, chance. But now I think some people are destined to meet, especially when they need each other." "So you think it was fate that Sophia walked into that store at the exact moment you were there?" Charles kissed Amanda's forehead. "I think you saved me just as much as I saved you. Maybe we saved each other. And now? Now we live, we're happy. We teach our children that real promises are always kept, that families can be formed by love, not just by blood, and that even on the coldest, hardest nights, there's always the possibility of a miracle just around the corner." Amanda nestled against Charles's chest, listening to the steady, calm beat of his heart. "I love you," she said. "I love you too. I love our whole family. I love the life we've built together." And as the city of Chicago breathed below with its millions of stories unfolding simultaneously, in the apartment in Lakeview, a family slept peacefully, knowing they had weathered storms and emerged stronger, more united, and more full of love than they ever imagined possible. The promise of a 10-year-old girl had transformed into a declaration of love for the future, and the future finally was smiling back at them. Dear listeners, we hope the journey of Sophia, Amanda, Peter, and Charles has deeply touched your hearts, just as it touched ours in telling it. This is a story about the transformative power of true promises, about how love can blossom in the most unlikely places, and about how a family can be born not just from blood, but from the conscious choice to love and protect one another. If you were moved by this narrative of hope and new beginnings, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Every day we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest and most beautiful side of the human soul, showing that even in the most difficult circumstances, true love always finds a way to triumph. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey, and we'll see you in the next episode for another story that will stir your heart.